On October 7, 2023, a collection of Palestinian militant groups led by Hamas launched what they called Operation al-Aqsa Flood, which was nothing less than a full-scale invasion of southern Israel from the Gaza Strip. The date was deliberately chosen, as it was the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, and it proved the deadliest terror attack in Israeli history. According to an October 9th report in the Times of Israel, which cited a source close to the militants, the attack happened in 4 stages. First, Hamas fired a barrage of 3,000 rockets into Israeli territory and used drones to take out Israeli surveillance outposts. Second, elite Hamas militants flew across the highly fortified Israeli-Gaza border using hang gliders. Third, the militants used explosives to create a breach in the border, and bulldozers were quickly brought up to open the gap further. Fourth, another elite unit attacked Israeli command and control, jamming communications in the area. The initial infiltration came at 6 different locations along the 15-kilometer arc on the border. Once this surprise attack had been completed, the rampage in the nearby towns began. As of October 11th, Israel reported over 1,200 fatalities, 3,000 injured and about 150 people abducted in the October 7th attack. That number is still expected to climb. Israelis, meanwhile, have not been the only ones killed or abducted by Hamas. Prisoners include 17 people from Nepal, 18 from Thailand, and 2 from Mexico, according to those countries' foreign ministries. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said at least 14 Americans were killed in the initial attack. People from countries ranging from France to Cambodia became casualties too. The attack was unprecedented. Not even during the Second Intifada in the early 2000s was there an invasion of Israeli territory. In response, Israel took an unprecedented step of its own and declared war on Hamas. Israel launched airstrikes against Gaza and cut off power and supplies to the territory in preparation for a ground invasion. The fact that such a massive assault, one reportedly up to 2 years in the making, happened in this way indicates nothing less than a catastrophic intelligence failure on the part of the Israelis. Indeed, reports soon swirled that the Egyptian security services got word that Hamas was planning an attack and tried to warn their Israeli counterparts that something big was coming. However, the warning fell on deaf ears, because these officials were supposedly more worried about Hezbollah to the north and militant activity in the West Bank, which had seen more incidents of violence recently. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu denied these reports, as did some sources in Egypt. But regardless of whether this particular part of the story is true, at least one critical asset of Israeli intelligence failed: the much-touted and highly controversial Pegasus Spyware. What is Pegasus, and how could it have failed to detect this attack? Meanwhile, how did Hamas plan the attack so well that it got around Israel's first-rate surveillance assets and traditional intelligence superiority? Let's begin. Israel's intelligence services are regarded as being among the best in the world. They have to be. Since the country's foundation after World War II, it has faced repeated attacks from those who deny its right to exist. The Israelis have had to fend off everything from small-scale terror attacks to full-scale wars with its neighboring countries over the last 75 years. Gaza, the small strip of land between Israel, Egypt, and the Mediterranean Sea, is home to 2.3 million people. It's one of the most densely populated and heavily watched areas in the world. There is also a highly fortified border between it and Israeli territory. Surveillance drones constantly patrol the skies over this tiny piece of real estate. The Israeli intelligence services rely on other sophisticated technological methods of information gathering too. One of those methods is the Pegasus Spyware. Pegasus is a creation of a company called the NSO Group, which is a subsidiary of Q Cyber Technologies. The NSO Group was created in 2010 and named after its 3 founders, Niv Karmi, Shalev Julio, and Omri Lavi. Based in Herzliya, Israel, the company is controversial internationally. Reportedly, the NSO Group and its parent helped Saudi Arabia spy on the journalist Jamal Khashoggi, who was murdered by that country's agents on October 2, 2018. A year later, Facebook, now Meta platforms, sued the company over its illegal spying through its WhatsApp platform. In late 2021, Apple sued the company too, over the use of Pegasus spyware to surveil its iPhone users. American politicians aren't keen on the NSO Group either. In November 2021, the Biden administration put it on the United States Entity List for acting contrary to the foreign policy and national security interests of the US. This was a big blow to the company, and NSO's placement there deprived it of access to the American technology it depends on. The NSO group has tried and failed to get exemptions from this ban. In July 2023, it began paying 3 major lobbying firms in Washington to plead its case, claiming that it was doing better background checks on clients and prioritizing human rights. Meanwhile, it criticized its detractors as being one-sided and anti-Israel. So far, these efforts have not amounted to much. Other critics say that the Pegasus spyware has morphed from the anti-terror purposes the NSO group sells it as being effective for. Instead, it has now become a tool for governments to crack down on journalists, activists, and political rivals. In January 2022, reports surfaced which revealed that Israeli police had used Pegasus not to track terrorists, but to spy on citizens and foreign nationals without a warrant or judicial oversight. Even people who were not originally targeted but had the spyware installed on their phones by accident were swept up, and the spyware revealed intimate aspects of their personal lives to the Israeli police, and the use of Pegasus spyware in this manner does not stop at Israel's borders. For example, a New York Times investigation revealed that Mexico had become the world's biggest Pegasus user. Mexico was the first foreign client for Pegasus, and successive governments there have used it to target journalists, human rights activists, and other government critics. The use of this spyware became such a big issue there that Mexico's president, Manuel López Obrador, while campaigning in 2018, promised that he would stop Pegasus abuses if elected. However, his promise proved hollow once he assumed power. Mexico's use of Pegasus spyware is even more intense now than it was before his presidency. Another example occurred in Europe in September 2023. Then, the Citizen Lab at the Monk School of Global Affairs at the University of Toronto revealed that Pegasus spyware had infected the iPhone of Galina Timchenko. Timchenko is the co-founder and publisher of the independent Russian Medusa news organization, which is a frequent critic of Vladimir Putin's regime. The incident came 2 weeks after the Kremlin labeled Medusa as an undesirable organization, although there is still not yet solid evidence that Russia is using the Pegasus spyware. Perhaps another government friendly to Russia was responsible for the incident, or perhaps it was someone else. As of now, we do not know. That would be in line with Pegasus' MO, as the spyware is designed to obfuscate the source behind its attack. In an effort to placate critics, especially the Biden administration, the Israelis said in late 2021 that they would henceforth prohibit Pegasus sales to governments that had a high risk of human rights abuses. However, Mexico and other governments around the world who have used it intrusively continue to do so. Meanwhile, in early 2022, the FBI also revealed that it had come into possession of Pegasus, though the agency claims it has never used the spyware in one of its investigations. But what does Pegasus software actually do? The spyware begins by infiltrating a targeted mobile phone. Once inside, essentially all data on the phone is available to the spyware's operators. Call logs, search logs, calendars, passwords, social media activity, photos, emails, browser history, contacts, cameras, and pretty much anything else we haven't listed here are all at the beck and call of Pegasus, and all without the user's knowledge. Pegasus is even capable of recording audio, like a user's phone calls, and getting around encrypted messages by reading them before encryption and after decryption. It can pinpoint a targeted user's location too, and potentially determine the people its targets have been meeting with. Pegasus is smart spyware in other ways too. It hides itself well, and is programmed to self-destruct if it cannot communicate with its command and control center for more than 60 days. It is even programmed to self-destruct if it recognizes that it was installed on the wrong device. Pegasus is not supposed to be mass spyware, rather it's targeted. Being installed on the wrong phone would only give the spyware's operators unnecessary information. However, as we've seen, this is not always the case, and its operators can keep it on the phones of people who have not been deliberately targeted. More recent versions of Pegasus are even harder to find, even for a cybersecurity specialist. In 2021, cybersecurity experts suspected that the spyware now only inhabits a device's temporary memory rather than its hard drive, so when the phone is shut off, it almost vanishes. Meanwhile, even when the phone appears to be turned off, Pegasus can still monitor audio through the device's microphone and video through the camera. The earliest version of Pegasus, which cybersecurity experts discovered in 2016, installed itself by spear phishing. This method consists of tricking people into clicking a malicious link that then puts the spyware on the device. However, Pegasus has gotten far more effective since 2016. It can now install itself through zero-click attacks, which do not require interaction from the phone's owner to be successful. Such attacks are often zero-day attacks, where the malware developer exploits vulnerabilities that an operating system's manufacturer is unaware of. Pegasus exploited WhatsApp through this method. All Pegasus needed to do in the process was make a call from WhatsApp to a targeted device. From there, the spyware installed itself in the device even if the device's owner did not answer the call. This was the origin of the 2009 Facebook lawsuit. Pegasus has another way of infecting devices. It can install itself through a wireless transceiver, which happens to be near a targeted phone. In 2021, some cybersecurity experts discovered unusual network traffic relating to Apple's iPhone photos and music apps at the time of Pegasus infection, which probably means that the NSO group is looking for and has found even more ways to install its Pegasus program on targeted devices. And yet, this sophisticated spyware completely failed to prevent the attack by Hamas on October 7th. This failure by itself is startling enough, but what makes it more stunning is that the attack reportedly took up to 2 years for the terrorists to plan. As we've seen, the execution of the attack on the border was also highly sophisticated. The motion sensors and cameras near the border did not detect any of the militants' movements, which is odd enough, but how could Pegasus fail to detect something that would require such a complicated plan with so many people involved in the conspiracy? The plan was indeed sophisticated. Hamas began its long preparation for the attack by lulling the Israelis into a false sense of security. According to a Times of Israel report, Hamas aimed at giving the Israelis the impression that it was unwilling and unable to fight, all while preparing for the October 7th attack. For example, earlier in the year, Hamas did not get involved in a clash between the Israelis and another terror group in the area, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Instead, Hamas was slowly but surely cultivating an image as a governmental body and civic organization of sorts. It spent a large part of its time diverting the Israelis' attention to its pleas for more work permits that would allow Gaza residents to enter Israel, as the jobs there pay significantly more than their counterparts in the Palestinian territories, sometimes up to 10 times the salary. This economic carrot helped create Israel's false sense of security. Speaking to Reuters, an Israeli Defense Force spokesman said the following: "We believe that they, Hamas, were coming in to work, and bringing money into Gaza would create a certain level of calm. We were wrong." To ensure it would be sending mixed signals, Hamas continued its typical bombast that called for the destruction of Israel. While in most cases these threats amount to empty boasting or in-group signaling, as a collective, they serve to throw the Israeli security services off their game. Israel seems to have interpreted these calls as customary cries, while Hamas's recent actions suggested that they were more interested in improving economic opportunity for Gaza residents. Meanwhile, Hamas launched a deception campaign that included rioting in Gaza to further add to Israelis' distraction. With the riots taking up the Israelis' attention, less attention was paid to the group's plans for its coming terror attack. These were violent incidents, but far less so than the attack that actually happened. When reporting on Israeli surveillance of Gaza, Wired quoted Jack Williams, a former hacker with the United States National Security Agency. Williams said the following: "Intelligence in an environment like Israel isn't finding a needle in a haystack, it's finding the needle that will hurt you in a pile of needles." Given the number of Hamas members involved in the invasion, it's not plausible to me that Israel missed every human intelligence reflection of the planning, but I feel confident that there are always Hamas operatives talking about credible plans to attack the IDF. So Israel can't respond with force to every threat, even every credible one. They'd be at a heightened state of alert or actively engaged all the time, and that's probably actually worse for security. Alongside these active deception campaigns, Hamas also took steps to prevent leaks and ensure its internal security. Reportedly, all of the terrorists that trained for the October 7th incident were only there on a need-to-know basis. Many of them were ignorant of the mission they were actually training for. Hamas launched its attack at the right time, too, because the Israeli Defense Force moved more troops to the West Bank to deal with the violence there, as Gaza seemed to be relatively calm. Hamas kept its cards close to the vest with its potential allies too. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad was invited to participate in the attack only hours before it began. Up until then, it was completely ignorant about Hamas's plans. Most members of Hamas itself were also ignorant. Only a few people within Hamas's elite Qassem brigades were aware of the extent of the planning. Internal Israeli drama helped the terrorist prepare as well. Hamas took advantage of the long-running political controversy in Israel over Prime Minister Netanyahu's attempt to limit the power of the country's Supreme Court to block legislation passed by the Knesset. The country's security services had warned that the political division was eroding their cohesion and readiness. And as all of this happened, Hamas continued training. Reportedly, this training included a mock Israeli border town where militants stormed homes and killed residents. Israeli intelligence has become quite good at discovering terrorists over the years. It was good enough to know the precise locations of Hamas leadership and has killed the group's important figures in targeted, surgical strikes on more than one occasion. Israel was even capable of detecting and neutralizing the underground tunnels that militants from Hamas and other groups use to ferry troops and supplies. With such capabilities, Israel must have seen these structures, but it still allowed itself to believe that Hamas did not want to get into another military confrontation. Hamas has long had Iran's backing, and reportedly, officers from that country's Islamic Revolutionary Guard have been collaborating with the terror group since at least August, including multiple meetings in Beirut that included representatives from Hezbollah to help plan the air, land, and sea offensive against Israel. Iran denied these reports, but if meetings occurred between such high officials while Israel was kept in the dark, it raises questions about the effectiveness of Pegasus. It will take a long time before the full details of how Hamas carried out this attack become known, but from what we do know, it's clear that Hamas cashed in on vulnerabilities in Israeli intelligence capability. These vulnerabilities seem to have included the over-reliance on technology. There is one unit in Israel, the 8200 unit, which casts a wide net for developing intelligence sources. The 8200 unit seeks individuals with health problems, potential sex scandals, and so on. However, this human source development may not have been as all-encompassing as experts once believed. In 2005, the Israeli Defense Force withdrew from Gaza, which it had militarily occupied since the Six-Day War of 1967. Israeli settlers also withdrew from the area. Since then, Israel has come to rely more and more on technological methods of intelligence collection, in the absence of manpower in the area. For a while, this technological dominance was sufficient for Israel to keep an eye on the area. Many of the targeted assassinations of senior figures in Hamas and other terror groups came during this time. However, and the details are only now emerging, the reliance on this technology seems to have led the Israeli security services to over-specialize in signals intelligence and neglect human source collection. The Times of Israel quoted Amir Avivi, a retired general with the Israeli Defense Force, who once served in an intelligence role, as saying, "The other side learned to deal with our technological dominance, and they stopped using technology that could expose it. They've gone back to the Stone Age." According to Avivi, Hamas militants were no longer using electronic equipment like smartphones and computers to discuss their plans. Rather, they were making plans the old-fashioned way, in person, and in secret rooms specifically designed to guard against espionage. Sometimes these rooms were underground. Pegasus may be one of the world's most powerful spyware programs, but it cannot exactly work when the people it's supposed to be spying on don't use electronic equipment to plan their activities. Hamas and its allied terror groups would have known about Pegasus and made plans to get around or deceive it. Once targets understand that they are under surveillance, they tend to find ways to adapt, including alternative means of communication. Did Hamas and other terror groups' knowledge of the Pegasus spyware allow them to deliberately send deceptive signals to Israeli intelligence? Did such a thing affect the 8200 unit's ability to develop the sources which could have given it advanced warning of the recent terror attack? It will take some time to figure out. Whatever the final details wind up being, the vaunted Israeli security services suffered a heavy reputational blow with the latest outbreak of terroristic violence in Gaza, one which will take them years to recover from. Although the failure of the Pegasus spyware was not the only thing responsible for the catastrophic Israeli intelligence lapse, it was an important component, and the October 7th attack reveals the limits of technology. No matter how highly sophisticated it is, even the most powerful and intrusive surveillance regime will have vulnerabilities that determined attackers will find ways to exploit. But what do you think? Could Israel have made better use of the Pegasus spyware to prevent Hamas's October 7th attack? What other factors could the Israeli security services have neglected? What else went wrong? Don't forget to let us know in the comments section below the video. Also, remember to hit the like button and subscribe for more military analysis from military experts.